Actually, it's me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm
Well.
Charles Davis. This is our agenda. We're going to do the welcomes and introductions, and then we'll move on to the session goals. We'll show some background and overview, how we got here, what's happening in Michigan to prevent incarceration and police justice. We're trying to look at what's missing and how might a learning community support your efforts. Next, we'll have a discussion with both a large group and then a small group, and we'll end up wrapping up and going to next steps. I will now pass it on to Jen.
And one slide back, Cosine.
All right, thank you. Well, we come together today to explore the creation of a statewide learning community that focuses on bridging connections, sharing resources, lessons learned, and identifying alternatives to policing and off-ramps rather, to incarceration. During our time today, we do have a few objectives. We want to share our vision for this learning community, provide the context behind its formation, because we do believe that bringing like-minded individuals like yourselves together can really create a powerful network that drives positive change across the state. Next, we'll break into small groups to gather your valuable input. We want to hear your thoughts on the structure, the format, and the topics that would best serve your needs. This is an opportunity for you to contribute your ideas and your insights that will shape this learning community into something that is truly impactful. Finally, we'll come back together as a whole group and we'll discuss the feedback we received to identify the next steps for our learning community sessions. Your input definitely guides our path forward and helps us to work towards creating a supportive and engaging environment for all. So we thank you for all being here. And with that, next slide, Cosine.
All right, so this is Des with Michigan Roundtable again. And we're gonna go ahead and bump actually into the next slide. So in 2020, the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor caught national attention for the disparate treatment of Black bodies by police. We know that their deaths have been but a drop in the bucket, and you see listed on this slide a few more names of casualties to racialized policing. But we also know that there are many living casualties of this country's policing and legal system that results in the mass incarceration of Black and brown bodies and their families through a range of practices, from driving while Black to over surveillance, the persistent use of hotspot and broken windows policing, having police present in our schools, and so much more. As we move into the next slide, I want to share a little bit more about the work of the Michigan Roundtable. We are the conveners of the Metro Detroit All Pact, which brings various community and civil rights groups together with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies to dig into policing practices like racial profiling, data transparency, and community policing. We are also working with community groups like MI-CEMI, DJC, Michigan Live, and Moses to launch a massive data collection and community engagement project that calls for transparency and accountability of the criminal legal system in Southeast Michigan. Our organizations like us, our hosts that are here for today, and the work that everybody in the audience is doing falls within a spectrum of intervention, from reform to transformation to abolition of the system. Our collective work focuses on different touch points of police interaction with community members. And when we move into the next slide, the diagram that you see on the slide is a visualization of these touch points and how our organizing is working to create off-ramps from mass incarceration, which will in turn transform public safety to provide safer, more effective alternatives to police contact and incarceration. If we move into the next slide, it is through discussions with our community partners and in being in spaces like MI-CEMI that we have found that many groups are super focused on a particular issue area, an intervention point, or around their local community. And this often results in us operating in silos. In turn, we are missing opportunities to collaborate and to amplify each other's work where there is overlap in order to affect systemic change and statewide change. As we move into the last slide, this also contributes to isolation and burnout. When we're confronted by barriers and stonewalling by police and governing bodies, and it reduces the presence of community voices in legislative spaces where policy decisions impacting these agencies throughout the state are being made. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Erin.
So as a result, what ends up happening is our local efforts miss opportunities to learn from and support each other. We experience higher burnout due to lack of peer support. We waste a lot of time reinventing the wheel, developing public education materials, figuring out how to overcome police union objections, navigating FOIA and data requests. And then at the state level, of course, we miss out on the expertise from local efforts that could inform policy proposals. And we fail to harness grassroots supports to help get good policy proposals over the finish line. What that basically means is that it's often said those closest to the problem are best situated to understand what the solutions are and to help achieve them. And so we wanted to create this community so that people have what they need to be able to move good policy forward. Sheba.
Thank you, Erin. Next slide, Cosin. Next slide. So today we really want to share with you how this learning community has come about. I know Des and Erin were kind of leading into that, but what does the actual proposal look like for what we're hoping to co-create with you all today as part of this meeting? In 2022, MI-CEMI, in this group, this particular subcommittee that we're all a part of here, we am working with the Detroit Justice Center, Friends of Restorative Justice, Link Up, conducted a statewide survey of groups and activists involved in work to prevent mass incarceration. And from that survey, respondents identified a learning community as the most helpful collaborative support needed to help advance their work. So we were really excited to hear that. And I'll just say I was personally very excited to see these results as I have been discussing with a few of my own colleagues about the desire and need for a learning community specific to Michigan. And so I would love to shout out just quickly, dear friends here in Detroit at the James and Grace Lee Boggs Center to Nurture Community Leadership, who have been hosting learning spaces and gatherings for decades across very similar topics. And I also want to shout out good friends at Interrupting Criminalization, Community Resource Hub, and Borealis Communities Transforming Policing Fund, who have been hosting a national learning community with monthly meetings across a variety of topics. And these two groups and spaces have been very rich and a great model for us as we launch this learning community here for Michigan leaders. Next slide. So some of the goals and opportunities that we see as part of launching this collaborative space is one, to build a supportive community with peers across the state and create a platform for rich strategy discussions. Two, to share resources that allow us to learn together and strengthen power and expand our alternatives across the state, really understanding what's working, what's being successful, what's being piloted, and really strengthening those resources and learnings across communities. The third goal and opportunity is to align strategies and tactics from local and national practitioners. So people have been doing this work well before, this work was popularized, more recently with some of the movement spaces. People have been doing this work for a very long time, and there's tons of strategies and tactics that we can tap into and should be tapping into to strengthen our collective efforts across the state. And then four, we see as a goal and opportunity is just to truly to connect our work with policy, with advocacy, the local level experience, the policy experience, and just really connecting those dots together. Next slide. So as we think about uplifting these four main goals, and together we can continue to build out these goals. If we can go back just, I think a few slides, Cosine, to the ideas and structures and the format for this. Thank you.
Slide 20, I think.
So the structure and format is what we're really hoping to get your thoughts and feedback on today. We kind of breaking it down into maybe two ways of seeing how this community may come together and operate. The first is through a series of learning sessions together. These may be thought of as more formal sessions where we'll be hearing from speakers across the state as well as across the nation on a range of topics for these various sessions. We're seeing this as a pilot year because it's our first time sort of launching this and doing this together as a state cohort. We are seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions to start with, which will be happening in September, November, January, March, and May of next year, 2024, but kicking off this September. The sessions will either be online, in person, or hybrid. And so again, we want to get some of your feedback today to see what will work best. We're also thinking about timing to see what feels most rich. Some of the learning spaces that I have been a part in have really felt good at about 90 minutes where we have time to hear from the speakers and break and kind of hear from various groups. So, you know, we'd love your input on that. As we think about the learning sessions, we would like to make these topic specific. And so we'll be kind of diving into some of the topics that are of interest to you today. But for example, we may come across topics of specific to, let's say, for example, CVI, right? Community violence intervention. We're talking a lot about this across the state, I know right now. And what are the models for that? We may have, you know, a session where people are really hungry for alternatives around restorative practices, for example. So we'll dive into some of those topics, but we want to really take some time today to think about your interest in a variety of topics. We'll do some polling a little later. And then what our team will begin to do is kind of craft some of the topics, see who across the state is doing work around those topics, and then begin to situate those topics with some of these dates that we have here. So that's sort of the first of the two. And then the second would be small group check-ins, where we'd have an opportunity to really kind of get together in more of a discussion, more of a laid back check-in environment where we can share reflections and updates about our local work and hear from each other a little more, make that one-to-one connection. That may not happen as intimately in those larger group sessions where we'll be hearing from speakers. And as is to not make those sessions even longer than 90 minutes, we thought maybe having a small group session on the off months might be a good space where we can continue to tap in with each other and keep the energy and momentum high. So those small group check-in sessions will be on the off month. So we're looking at October, maybe early December before we all break for the holidays, February, April, and June potentially. So again, this is just sort of our proposal, and we want to hear back from you on, you know, how to make this really flow and meet our needs. The small group check-in could be, you know, 60 to 75 minutes, depending on, you know, what we all think would be sufficient to just tap in with each other, reflect, hear what's going on with some of the local efforts happening across the state. We talked a little bit about the topics, but we'll be looking at what's happening on the ground and really hearing from leaders actually implementing some of those alternatives that we think are really needed, that we're hungry for here, that's already happening, but maybe we're not aware that they're happening. So we're really going to be hearing about what's on the ground, as well as challenges and opportunities with implementation. So those are kind of some of the ways that we want to structure the community, the learning community there. We are asking, as part of this proposal and a part of this format, is for active engagement. Some topics may, you know, you may see that, okay, 2 out of the 5 topics is really what I'm most interested in. Great. But, you know, please come with us and continue to learn even on those other topics that, may not be directly related to what you're doing, but it's just a space for us all to connect, see who's in the room, see who's in the space, and continue to make those kinds of connections. So we hope that this group can stay involved with all of the sessions, come to the small groups, and just really, strengthen our engagement across the state. Next slide. With that, I think I'll pass it over to Chuck to get us going with our small group discussion and breakout.
And I'm going to pass it right on over to Cohesion.
Hello. Thank you so much, Sheba. And thank you so much, Chuck. So, as Sheba told you, active engagement. And so we're going to have an opportunity for that right now as we break into group discussions in our breakout rooms. Now, we want you to think of a few things while in these breakout rooms. In particular, we want to think, what do you like about the idea? We want to get some feedback from you. We want to know what you like and what you don't like. How can we make it more useful for you? Are there elements that don't seem useful for you? Are there things that absolutely do and that have to be included? Please let us know. And there are any topics perhaps that you want to discuss in the community that you don't see. On the next slide, you'll see we've got a group discussion of topics that we've come up with, but they are not all inclusive. Please add to this list as you will, discuss this list as you will, and come up with some information for feedback for us. And we'll have some polling for you later on as well to get your information on a few topics, to get your input on a few topics. Chuck will be preparing breakout rooms. It will be prompts pasted in the chat for you. Prompts such as the ones I read for you, and an open space again, as I said, for open discussion. So I'll check on the progress of these breakout rooms.
All right, breakout rooms are just about ready. So before I open up the breakout rooms, you'll have 25 minutes in the breakout rooms to discuss these prompts. And then you know how Zoom is. They'll give you the 1 minute countdown. We'll all come back together. And again, the focus on these breakout rooms is to get your feedback on how to make this learning community the most useful it could be for you as folks in the communities who are working to transform public safety in Michigan. And so before I open up the breakout rooms, any questions on just informational questions, either on the proposal or for the next steps? All right, and Cohesion will be leading us to debrief from our small group work while I take your feedback that you share in and put it in to update our poll for when we come together and get your feedback. So, Cohesion.
Thank you so very much, Chuck.
And so just while you get ready, Des was asking in the chat where we drop notes. So from the small groups, you had somebody from our core team in all of your groups will debrief and process the feedback you gave us in the small groups. And in particular, but we'll have some time here in a large group as well. And if there is feedback that you want us to adjust this poll before we drop that, we're going to get that right now. Okay, Cohesion.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap up our next step. We'd like to share your feedback, complete most post-meeting surveys. 1 second, I'm having a difficulty right here.
I think you're a slide or two early.
Yeah.
Hey.
Do you see it?
Yep.
Excuse me. Okay. So group discussions and breakouts. So we're wondering, as we get into a discussion now, what topics were most interest to you and your organization and or your work? As I said before, was there anything that would need to be true for you to participate or you and your organization to participate? And generally some feedback on what the structure and formatting is or how you feel the structure and formatting fits or should be improved or not.
So are we going to report out from our groups, y'all?
Please.
All right, well, I will be the first to go. I had an amazing group. I had folks that were from all over the state. And one of to answer the first question, it would be that folks are really interested in resources and information and having a place where we can find resources and information. Mental health is a top of the line conversation, harm reduction, coalition and community political education, and the fight against Cop City, y'all, a big one in our conversation. Then what was needed to be effective in this organization and participating. I love the idea of a pledge or us having some kind of charter, a commitment to this work. As we're asking everyone, participation is so key as we build this initiative or whatever it is that we're going to call this, as we build this learning community. It is so important to have accountability, right? It is important for us to make sure that the work that we build actually goes somewhere and moves. And it is important for us to have an anti-racist space, of course. And one of the things that was so intentional in saying was the fact that we talk about diverse representation, but we don't necessarily talk about diverse experiences. And that is very, very important and key, because we all could be, different cultural backgrounds, have different cultural backgrounds, different race, come from different places, have different analysis. But when you have different experiences at the table, that is diversity. That is, transformational. And we, of course, wanted to make sure that the folks that are impacted by these issues, but furthest from the resources that it takes to make changes, that they are at the table as well. And I'll pass it back to you, Cosine.
I can jump in, Cosine, with my group.
Sure. I'll follow you.
Is that okay?
Sure.
What topics are most of interest? I think our group really liked the topics, but one that we would add is really focusing on returning citizens and reentry, and just really overall reintegrating into society and some of the systemic exclusionary challenges that returning citizens are facing. What are the actual alternatives and practices and policies that we can see and advocate for on that front? So I would offer that as another category we would like to see on the poll. As we think about just general feedback, format, and structure, we heard some really wonderful ideas. Another topic is preventing burnout. We are often all working sometimes 6-7 days a week, various coalitions, maybe in our community, maybe in our church, our formal work. So, what battles, to pick and to fight, what to focus on. I think that goes back to what Alicia and her group was mentioning around, accountability and ensuring the work is moving forward. Not everyone can do everything. So how does this look for us to actually, have places and roles in the movement where we know, we're not getting burnt out because we're trying to do 10 things. Maybe you only need to do 3, right? But just thinking more about that, preventing burnout. One of our group members really liked the idea of the small groups and having that informal time to talk. Another thing that was highlighted is the, in terms of as we build it out further, really lifting up individual stories and direct impact more, because this is not just about, what is the alternative, but who are the people and the stories and the experiences that are really leading us to envision these alternatives, and what are their stories and how do they tell their stories? So that was one thing. We also talked about a community calendar as a resource, as a possible resource. Another coalition is doing, but that could be a resource here for us to think about as well. I will stop there.
I can jump in.
Thank you so much.
Oh, go ahead, Cosine.
Thank you so much. You were speaking on some points that actually resonate to what was happening in our group. One thing that came up as far as what makes these things the difficulties folks found was a tech barrier. Often we think about tech barrier as folks coming home from incarceration, but there's also a tech barrier between organizations, people who have different varying levels of familiarity with. So there was this idea of a general consensus, let's say, of what tech to use, what Google Docs to use, and some training that would allow folks to have a basic level of understanding so that communication with emails and docs would be a lot easier. I thought that was a great idea. There also was another member who brought up the idea of recognizing how different districting affects these movements that we're doing. right? Brought up the great idea of the different zoning and districting in the Washtenaw County and the Ypsilanti area, and how these different things and reporting happenings, when someone outside of Washtenaw County doesn't understand the intricacies inside, there's a disconnect there. And so the idea of each individual region understanding more about its lining and its arrangement geographically, I thought was really important. And with that, I will pass it forward.
I can jump in next and share out from room 5. So we had a very diverse group as well, with people located all over the state, Washtenaw County, people, of course, in Southeastern Michigan, and then also people who have done advocacy all the way up to the UP. And so some of the things that we talked about, I'll do the last 2 questions first, because we spent less time on those. But for number 2, everyone said that their organizations would be excited to participate. One thing that was discussed was about the idea of ensuring that other community members who might not already be in this space can be invited into this space if they're interested in these topics, just so that we are truly educating the community, including those who are not necessarily in this bubble of advocacy already. And then the other thing that was shared out was that webinars are really great, and this virtual format is really great because it eliminates travel time and ensures that people, even in their busy lives, can still participate in the sessions. In terms of the topics, people had really great ideas. So a few things that were generated from our discussion were the emphasis on having information that covers CVI, diversion, restorative justice, organizing strategies. A huge thing that came up was the idea of community buy-in. So figuring out, how do we involve people from different counties, people from different parts of our state, from the UP down to the Lower Peninsula. How do we ensure that all of our organizations are equipped with grassroots organizing to truly build collective power across our state? Also, things that came up were restorative justice, sentencing reform, and parole reform, which was something that wasn't necessarily on the list, but that people had interest in. And then overcoming institutional opposition. How do we deal with the union contracts? And then again, another thing that was emphasized was decreasing stigma. So many of us are passionate about this issue. Maybe we have family members that have been impacted by these systems, but how do we decrease the stigma so that we can work together collaboratively around these topics? So shout out to Group 5, they were awesome.
So I can go next. I had Group 3, and we had some similar conversations that are being echoed in here in regards to, like, with the burnout, thinking about like that accountability piece in that, and holding elected officials and that accountable. There was a lot of conversation too around having space to be able to help build narrative, and in particular being able to push back against, like, Attorney General Nessel, or around law enforcement agencies and sheriffs, and that when they keep using, there's a couple of very consistent messaging that they use, particularly around, like, the victim and trying to protect the victim, and that to resist change. But when you actually start to analyze that, there's really not a lot of substance, and it's also not taking into consideration some of the transformative processes that are out there and that do exist in regards to helping to repair relationships and harm that have been done. And so there's a consistent interest around being able to have a collective space to be able to help build that narrative, and also be able to share narratives with each other so that there's consistent messaging out there. We also talked about too, thinking about like some of how, like, the operationalizing piece in that, like when collaborating between organizations, and in particular large organizations to smaller organizations, and being able to share resources, and being intentional about building out the capacities of our smaller organizations and smaller groups. And then there was some conversation, and I see that Rodney helped share it into the chat and that, but talking about how do we build and maintain trust and rapport between groups when we have like transition or succession planning of organizers and of community leaders in different spaces. We talked from just thinking about that programmatic piece to echo what has been lifted up before, is around like needing some consistency around scheduling and around communication about the learning community sessions and about any updates relating it, and being intentional about centering the most impacted and accountability to the community within these spaces. And finally, just thinking about too around that intersectionality piece, particularly where work will overlap or has that potential to overlap within C3s and C4 type of work, and seeing about like where there can be that cross sector of information and of tactics and narratives and that. So I think, thank you for my group and that they were rock stars.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a very, very rock star lady group as well. I saw that repeated the idea of the resources, shared resources. The idea, for instance, one member in our group acknowledged that they're looking for resources to provide direct assistance. However, the direct assistance funds available may not meet their criteria, right? They may not meet the criteria. For instance, they may be dealing with youth who are actively, quote unquote, in the system as opposed to prevention. And so therefore they can't find the funds that they need to assist those youth. And however, we find that across different organizations, you may have mini grants, you may have resources to funds that would aid those other orgs. And so there was a real concentration in my group on recognizing how shared resources could be used to, as Dad said, to amplify smaller organizations as well. Awesome. We had a lot of great discussions. Can we get any information on the polls?
So with that, I think I got a lot of things from the groups to add to the survey. So I've tried to include that. Just drop that link into the chat. We'll also share it with you all, as well as the video from this after this session. But please do fill in that survey. We've heard a lot of good ideas about what we could talk about, but it's only 5 sessions. So when we actually start designing, okay, what are we going to talk about in January? What are we going to talk about in November? Knowing what's most important, what's most on your mind will help us set that priority and make sure we've got content that works for you. So links in the chat, please give it a look. That's all I got, Cosine.
Okay, thank you. So please, Sheba.
So yeah, just really quickly, Chuck, are you asking that we do the poll now, or is that a post-meeting ask?
Folks can do it. They can do it either now or after the meeting. The link's there now. So I know for myself, I'll say if I don't do it now, I'll say, oh, I'll get to it. And then I get to everything else. So I would love for folks to take 2 minutes to fill out that poll now. And if this isn't the right time for you, have other options, but get it off your to-do list. You won't have to worry about it down the road then.
And while the conversations are fresh on your mind, folks. So it'd be really great if you could just get it out, get it done as soon as possible. And again, that's a part of us holding each other accountable. It's us trying to get as much as information as we can today. We do understand if you can't get it done today, let's try to get it done in as timely as fashion as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I'm curious, we heard from some of the co-hosts for the small groups reporting back. Is there anything from any of the participants that you want to make sure that we consider as we move forward with this? Things you didn't get a chance to tell your co-host or in your small group, things you haven't had a chance to hear in the large group yet?
So Chuck, I didn't report out on group 6, so I'll just do a really quick report out because a lot of it was very similar to what was talked about. Very much people wanted to do it via Zoom because they felt that was a way that they could participate. And one of the things that people were hoping came out of the small groups is to move towards how to do advocacy strategies together. And we're very excited about the idea of using all of the knowledge that's in this community with each other. And lastly, there was some very interesting ideas of ways of using theater in terms of social justice models. So I'll just leave it at that. Turning it back to you, Chuck.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, and I didn't share back from my small group either. A lot of very similar things. The two pieces that I haven't heard that I want to lift up. One is I heard from several of our participants that the ability to connect with others, either doing similar work in other locations or doing related but different work, that sense of connection was something people really seemed to appreciate about it. And then I also heard that a lot of the participants who are involved in restorative justice or violence prevention and intervention works, those conflicts don't come from nowhere. So being able to understand, I guess this wasn't lifted up a little bit, but be able to understand the broader resource network beyond just their intervention. What are the other resources that they can bring and support the people they're working with and help or wrap them around with the full suite of services to address the causes of the conflict. Any other reports from the small group? Either formal facilitators or from the masses?
I mean, I shared this in our small group, but those of you that put all of this together, thank you so much for the work that you already put in, because this is amazing to get us started. So thank you. You've done a lot. I really appreciate it. And those in our group did as well. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Bonnie. So I just want to give a shout out to folks that were in my group. They really bring their full selves. They were unapologetic about the conversation, and I believe that is the building of strong relationships and us building trust for each other. So I just want to give them a shout out.
Oh, and you're already on Spotlight. I was wondering if that was also going to be the segue for you to take us out with the closing steps.
Oh yeah, we can do that. All right, so you all, our next steps will be for you to complete that post-meeting survey. Please get that done as soon as possible. We will take your input and refine the structure, format, and schedule the meeting dates. And those meeting dates are really, really important to how this work moves. I know that folks want the work to move, so we really need that feedback. Send any additional feedback, ideas, it's something that you may have forgot. Please feel free to send that to the email that is there, mail@MI-CEMI.org. And next, you're going to want to definitely share this with your network. We will share the slides and videos with you. I think Chuck dropped those in the link. And please feel free to share with people who you know may be interested. I think one of the groups mentioned that they felt like there were people who needed to be here. Make sure you share the information with them so that they are here. We want them here. And officially join our learning community, y'all. Join the listserv and sign up to be a part of the learning community. That's going to be shared out from probably Chuck or Jen or Cozine in a follow-up email. So be looking for that. And in August, watch y'all's email for the registration link and calendar invite for the first session that will take place in September. I am so excited to be a part of this group. I am so excited to be back in the world of coalition and building with the other organizations that are doing this work in my community. And I thank you all for your time. I thank you for showing up. I thank you for bringing your authentic selves to this conversation, and really looking forward to September. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Chuck.
All right, Sheba.
I'm jumping in, Chuck. Thank you. Just to follow up on this slide, actually, and it's not a DJC update, but if Aaron might have one, feel free, Aaron, to jump in. But in terms of just the feedback and next steps, the link you have today is really kind of a initial polling, but there may be a more detailed post-meeting survey, which is us taking all of this feedback and really kind of shaping some things that we'll need some more input on. So we may kind of get more into the weeds if we see that, okay, 80% are saying hybrid. What locations might make sense, right? So there may be some other details we're gonna need. So we are asking that you do join our listserv. Again, Chuck will send an email, or, our partners at MI-CEMI will send an email to say, hey, sign up. And then that's how we know you're actually officially interested. We did have some people on today that were observing and or listening in for another org or wanting to share with their networks. So, you may not be the one to sign up yourself. So once you do receive the email, share the, hey, join the community link with your partners. And as they begin to get engaged and we know who's in this community, we'll send them that survey so we can get more detailed information. So I just wanted you to know the link you have today is more of an initial poll, but there will be perhaps a more detailed survey. So as we get closer to really refining everything, we'll want to hear from you again. So just stay tuned to that. I think that was kind of the main thing that I really wanted to elevate as part of some of our next steps together. That's all I had.
All right, thank you all. I know that we've wrapped up on time, and so we've got a couple of minutes for announcements. It's part of that mindset of how do we share with each other, support each other's work. So I'm going to pass it over to Aaron, who's going to talk about an event that's coming up with DJC and some of our other partners.
Sure. Thank you, Chuck. So just wanting to shout out, so this Friday from 12 to 1:30, DJC, along with several other partner organizations that are in this space and in this community and this work, will be doing a town hall, a virtual town hall on Michigan's child support system. And the purpose of this is to really elevate the conversation around ways that child support kind of perpetuates and contributes to mass incarceration. And so given that this body is dedicated to ending mass incarceration, I wanted to elevate this in this space. You can use the QR code on this flyer to register for the event. And thank you, Chuck, for allowing me to just highlight this upcoming event in this space. But we would really welcome your participation, and we're sure that it's going to be a really impactful event that gives information on just how we can fight against mass incarceration by combating our child support system.
Thank you, Aaron. Any other announcements before we wrap up today?
I would like to make a quick announcement for Emergent Justice. So we are about to kick off our campaign to end bad police interrogation. We know that it is responsible for the main reason why people are wrongfully convicted. And we have a bi-weekly Wednesday night meeting that starts at 6 or 6:30. But if you are interested, please reach out to us at Emergent Justice. Check us out, emergentjustice.com, emergentjustice.org, and we'll send you information for our meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elisheva. All right, y'all. You are all doing so much amazing work in communities, doing incredible efforts to help stop mass incarceration, to make our communities safer and more justice. I am so grateful for for the work you're doing every day to make that happen. I am so grateful that you shared an hour and a half of your time today. And I look forward to getting this learning community up and running so that we can continue to be in community, support each other, build together, and work together to make our communities more safe, more just, and to end mass incarceration and stop those on-ramps that lead people into the criminal legal system. So with that, thank you all. Blessings on your day. And I look forward to seeing you again. Look out for that email with more information.
Thank all of you. Great job. Appreciate
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Remember, this is your community.
Absolutely.